There we go. What is going on, boys and girls? That's the sound of the Bass Kayak and Beers podcast on the Paddle and Fin Network. It's your boy Armando, and thank you for joining us for today. We got a great episode for you today. We got Cody Milton, Angler of the Year for the Hobie BOS. Right now, today is, I think, the 17th of November. Cody is going to be on the Reel Down. When I say today, obviously, I mean the day with Cody. Cody's going to be in the Reel Down with the guys from the Reel Down, Jimmy Skinner and Dan Perry. So we're all part of the Paddle and Fin family. So I didn't want to have my episode and then following day have the Reel Down with the same guest, Cody Milton. So I can't give you really a recap of my week because by the time this airs, it's going to be the first week of December. Like I said, we kind of want to not double down on the same week back to back with the same guests because we want to cover different things and want this to make it enjoyable for you guys. I know most of you that listen to me also listen to the other Paddle and Fin episodes like the Reel Down, Bass Fishing for Noobs, the hunting episode. We have so many episodes. We have one every week. So want to do our best to kind of like spread the wealth and grow the kayak fishing community and make it all, enjoyable for you guys and not bore you with this kind of the same narrative on back-to-back days. But regardless, Cody Milton had an amazing year, not only on the Hobie BOS, but the KBF. I started getting hooked on tournaments about 3 years ago, and that's where kind of Cody Milton was up and coming kayak angler. By then, I think Russ Snyder kind of dominated the headlines, and Cody Milton was just rising to the top. And since then, he's really established himself as one of the best anglers in kayak bass fishing. I've had him multiple times on my podcast. It's always enjoyable when great conversations with Cody, and I always feel like I learned a lot. He was actually my first guest. Big guest that I had, like tournament angler that I had before I moved into Paddle and Fin. So I'm always thankful for Cody. I was really excited the first time I had Cody. I'm like, finally I get somebody like the big name in tournament fishing. Back then I only had like 70 listeners in my little Bass Kayak and Beers podcast. With Paddle and Fin, obviously the brand has grown, and I really appreciate you guys. I've always encouraged you guys if you have any ideas for the show, I'm more than willing. This show is for you guys, for you to enjoy it. Jay Valentin messaged me the other day, and he wanted me to bring more tournament directors and do an episode like I did with Chris Morales, highlighting the Texas Kayak Bass League. So, Jay, I listened to your advice. I am trying to get Duke Trend and Jeremy Baker. I'm waiting for Duke Trend to release his schedule for the North Texas kayak fishing. So, as soon as that happens, I'll reach out to him and have him on and also promote all those Texas trails. So thank you, Jay, for your suggestion. And again, you guys can follow me on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube, Bass Kayak and Beers. And you can email me for any suggestion at basskayakandbeers@gmail.com. So again, thank you so much for supporting the show. Big shout out to my sponsor, Douglas Rods. Go to douglasoutdoors.com. Check out the full lineup of LRS, X Matrix, and award-winning fly fishing rods. We'll go to a quick Waypoints commercial, and we'll have Cody Milton join us. So Cody Milton, how you doing, man?
Doing well. How are you doing?
Very good, man. First of all, congratulations, man. You've done another amazing year. First time that I know of that somebody has won multiple AOYs on different national trails, like KBF and then Hobie BOS. How does that feel to be the first one to do that?
It feels pretty good. I think Drew won the Bassmaster one this year.
Yeah.
And so I think he's the only other one that's got two. So now I guess it's the race to who gets all three of them.
Well, man, both of you are at the top of your game this year. Drew with the Bassmaster Kayak Series and you with KBF and the Hobie BOS. Did you even fish any of the Bassmaster Series?
I didn't this year. I fished the Classic, and all three of the schedules were like kind of so heavy this year on events that now I chose to just do two of them this year. I'm definitely doing quite a bit of the Bassmasters next year though.
Are you excited about new tournament director? I know it hasn't been announced. I'm not sure if you know who it is already, but are you excited
I
of
am.
what they
No,
got?
no, I think they've got some. I mean, it sounds like they're going to have some really good people, in some of the places that we need to have them. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah,
A lot of
right.
I feel like it'd be someone that's has a lot of experience with it, within the kayak industry already. So that is exciting.
Yeah, I think Bassmaster is really going to benefit from having stability. And
Hmm.
by that, I mean somebody with experience fishing trails and national trails and knowing the ins and out of how to run a kayak tournament. So excited for that. Hopefully, it's been a rocky road for them moving forward. I'm a fan of it. I know a lot of times I'm heavy on the criticism, but I've always said I want them to grow. And I want them to grow. I think it's great for kayak fishing if Bassmaster can kind of figure it out and grow. But sometimes things need to be kind of called out
Yeah.
respectfully in order to make changes. And
Yeah.
that's what we all wanted. So,
Yeah. I think you got it exactly right.
exactly. So, there we go. But let's talk about, first of all, the Hobie BOS, man. Before we dive into the actual TOC, which I'm very interested to hear the story about it because I've said it on the podcast before. Moving going on to the TOC once the regular season was done, I was like, there is no way Cody Milton's going to lose the AOI. I was like, there would be the biggest upset or surprise if Cody
Yeah.
Milton, because first of all, of who you are, and second of all, it's Cattle Lake, and I've seen what you've done on Cattle Lake.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you ever struggled on Cattle Lake, but from what I've seen, I mean, I remember the KBF National Championship with you and Guillermo. Just,
Hmm.
I mean, you guys went on an absolute tear, just battling one of the most exciting tournaments to kind of follow on Tourney X. Well, actually, that was Fishing Chaos. But anyways, follow online, and it was one of those tournaments that I feel like, man, I wish this would have been televised because you guys were the
Yeah.
last hour, just like
That one was.
leapfrogging each one with like 20 plus inch bass. It was exciting. So going into the Hobie BOS, the TOC, I figured there's no way he's gonna lose it. Obviously, you have one of the most one of the best anglers in Christine Fisher, riding your tail at the second spot, and that she's always a threat.
Always.
Um, but eventually, you you needed what you needed to get to the AOI. But before we actually dive into the TLC, how was your season for the Hobie BOS? What worked for you early on that allowed you to stay so consistent?
Man, honestly, I mean, I'm pretty sure I took my first three finishes of the year. I know I took the first two, and I can't remember if you follow was in between Broken Bow or not. But man, honestly, the shortest answer is just the springtime. I feel like we had a lot of tournaments where we had pretty predictable weather during the week, and even throughout the event. Like we had some really our first three tournaments of the year were, I don't know, I guess you could say it's kind of like a little bit of a power fisherman's paradise, somewhat, especially with like Santee Cooper being 3 to 4 foot high, and I mean, there was bass spawning like crazy on that lake. Um, I mean, I guess Broken Bow is a little different. There wasn't a whole lot of fish like actually on beds at that point in the year. But it was another deal where I could cover a whole lot of water. Like I was pretty much dead sticking a big spook on pole timber and in shade pockets. And other than that, it was just kind of chasing that swim jig and spinnerbait bite all throughout the spring. Which is definitely what I'm best at and have the most confidence doing is kind of, I don't know, following those bigger fish during the start of the spring. It's definitely my favorite thing to do.
Yeah, you've been known as to me as one of the, if not the best, how do you describe it? Bed fishing or spawning fishermen. You've always seemed to do great. I remember Hobie BOS here in Lake Fork. What was it? 3 years ago, I want to say. You did
Yep.
amazing. I
Yeah.
remember that I had you on the podcast, and one of the things that I was like, man, that is awesome. Is you were working a big bass for something like 15 minutes. Like I
Oh, yeah,
think you
sure.
it came off, and then you set for 15 minutes waiting for her to come back. Eventually, you got it. I think that's one of
Yeah, I think
the
that
best fishing stories I've heard.
yeah, that was like the fifth one I caught. I think it was like it was the Bassmaster on Lake Fork, I think. But yeah, no,
Bassmaster, I thought it was Hobie Beal. Oh no, yeah, it was Bassmaster, right?
Bassmaster. Yeah, I broke. It was one of the only fish I hadn't had marked in practice, and she was like really cruising hard, and I broke her off, and then she came right back in 10 minutes and just sat right there and ate again. That was pretty cool. I kind of forgot about that.
No, that was an interesting one.
Yeah.
And when you saw the schedule for Hobie BOS, and you noticed, okay, Kato is gonna be at the it's
Oh,
gonna be the TOC. Were you just kind of like salivating when you saw this, like before
oh,
you even knew you were gonna be, at the top of the list? I'm
yeah.
assuming you were just salivating when you saw that.
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone in the room was, because I mean, everyone there, the top 50, we'd spent all week there, and for the most part, I would say everyone had a pretty decent practice. I didn't hear of a lot of people that didn't at least get some big fish every day or something like that. So yeah, no, I think we were all pretty excited to be coming back there during probably the best part of the year for Caddo. Definitely when it's more of a tree fishery with those fish spawning on the trees. This was, I mean, the TOC was a little different as far as like it's such a good shad fishery that
Yeah.
with all the grass and things like that, it did turn into a little more of a schooling type fishery than it normally would have.
Going reflecting back on the season, what you were consistent. You didn't win one, but you will always seem like, I think your worst finish was, well, in the top three was fourth place or something like that, right? You
Yeah.
So what, I mean, you touched on it a little bit about being the springtime. Was there any other factor that allowed you, would you say, other than just being in the right season, what help you stay so consistent?
Yeah, I've talked about this a little bit. It is it's the first year I've fished in 3 years out of the same boat. And I'm not a big fan of, I feel like there's about five different kayaks that are the best kayaks for five or six different things that you have to do to be successful. But man, that the Hobie PA 12 360, like that thing's pretty legit. Like I can pretty well launch it anywhere I need to. And, it moves through trees well, and it actually paddles as good as, I mean, you're not going to paddle a PA 14 super well, but like I feel like that PA 12 is just on the cusp of kind of being a hybrid on everything, which I mean, if you're going to travel around the country, you kind of need a little bit of the best of all worlds sometimes. So I mean, that's the only thing I really kept, really, there was the only thing I really kept the same this year that I hadn't kept the same for years prior. um and I mean, yeah, I mean, it really did feel, I don't know, it did feel a lot more normal being in that boat all year than jumping back and forth between three or four different platforms.
One of the things that I remember when you were on the podcast, you were, um, I think you were fishing at KBF Trail 1 and 2, and then the day one, you had a new, I don't know if it was sponsorship or what, but you had new electronics that you were trying for the first time, and I think day one you skunked, and then the second day you just took all the electronics out and just said, "Screw it, I'm just gonna fish," you know, to my confidence.
Yeah,
What has changed from that point? I think that was about 2 years ago.
yeah, yeah.
How are you now with electronics? Do you still rely on all electronics? I mean, are you relying more on electronics now, or do you still go by instinct?
Not a lot. I mean, I have live scope, like I have twin graphs set up on my depth finders, but I would say 90%. I think the only tournament I fished with two graphs on my boat all year was at Toledo Bend, and I probably only used them for about 10 minutes, like somewhere during that first day. And then I did never use it anymore after that. Now I don't know. I'm kind of weird. Like I use it as a GPS a whole lot more than a depth
Yeah.
finder. I don't like having the sonar. I mean, I've swam under boats. I know how loud they are. I mean, you can even see how shad goes up and down whenever you have them on, or versus not having them on. So it's like, I don't know. They kind of bother me, especially in shallow water where I like prefer to find myself come tournament day.
Yeah,
But
I've noticed when I started fishing, I had an Ascent 12T,
hmm
and I'm not say that I'm nowhere near close to your level back then, but I fished for almost half a year without no electronics, and I found, I found success after a few months. Then I got the electronics, and I always thought, that kind of distracted me and took away from what the instincts that I built on it. And
Mhm.
recently, I had a replacement hole for my Hobie PA14. I hadn't had time to put the electronics, and I've gone twice, and the same thing that I think to myself, how bad, I mean, how counterproductive is that, the ping from that sonar? I wish somebody had the science, and I know
Yeah.
probably none of the companies that built that want that information to be out, if in fact it is accurate. But I've
Mhm.
always found myself like, I've had my best days have been without even using my sonar. I understand that maybe like 100-degree summer, you kind of want to find how deep they are. Maybe if they're like 20, 30 feet deep and you find them, so you're not going to find them without a sonar at that point. Maybe
True.
the ping is not going to affect them that much.
Yeah.
But I feel like, for example, Jordan Marshall, who is uh you know great shallow water fisherman, he doesn't use one. And I think we get so caught up in the electronics. And if you have a little bit of instincts, if you develop a little bit of instincts, where do you think they are? What makes sense to you as to
Mhm.
where they're gonna be, and kind of what that, considering the weather, the time of year, the wind, the type of lake, and that doesn't come automatically. That just comes with time on the water. I
Mhm.
think you find that without electronics, you can be just as, even maybe more successful.
Yeah. And I mean, it's there's just I don't know, I feel like I mean we have a lot of really really good junk fishermen in our
Yeah.
sport. Or like Guillermo's unbelievable junk fisherman. I'm even a little bit of a junk fisherman, I think myself, but I feel like a lot of the people that win on a regular basis are a little more specialized than probably of that of the bass boat world. Which, if you look at like how bass boat world originated with people being more specialized, it's
Yeah.
like a Fryer flipping or a Timmy Horton, deep cranking things like that, or a Rick Clun throwing a spinnerbait. But now I feel like our sport, I don't know, it does seem a little more specialized. It's like, like Ewing's that, by far, the best live scoper that we have, or
Yeah.
was, by far the best jerkbait fisherman we have. And yeah, like or Russ is probably the best flipper that there is. And so it's and I don't know, I feel like when you have a kayak and you have an ability to launch anywhere, and in most places that's public, I don't know, it kind of gives you the ability to find the water that you're looking for, that want to spend your time in.
When you say, just for maybe audience that may not be familiar with the term junk fisherman, what is it that you define as junk fisherman? Because obviously it's not an insult when you're saying
No,
Guillermo Gonzalez is a
I mean,
junk
I
fisherman.
more than anyone. Yeah, I mean, or just as much as anybody. No, I mean, it's when I don't know. It's like you're in a pretty good area and you're rolling down a bank and there's a laydown in front of you, so you're going to throw a square bill on the end of the laydown, and then you're going to probably pick up a jig and flip the dead middle of it, and then go around, and there might be a little patch of reeds, or some lily pads that you flip a frog around, like just fishing what's in front of you, not necessarily fishing a pattern as much. So
Yeah.
probably the way to put it.
So there you go. For those that are listening, it's not, when we say junk fisherman, it's not an insult. I know it
Yeah.
kind of sounds that way, but it's not. That's the that's what we meant by when we saying junk
Mhm.
fisherman. What is Do you consider yourself like an all around, or do you consider yourself more of a specialist or a junk fisherman, or maybe all around?
Man, probably a little more of a junk fisherman. I really haven't. I haven't had a good electronic tournament in even the St. Clair tournament that I won on a jerkbait this year. Like I just kept my depth finder off. Like I couldn't get them anymore. I couldn't get them like 300 yards further than where I was catching them. Like they were all just in one spot. So I would just sit there and I don't know, be quiet, I guess is the way I think about it. So no, I don't know. I need to use it more. I need to use my graphs more, I feel like, but I definitely don't. I don't know. I'm probably not relying on them enough in some cases.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned you need to, or that you're not relying enough. Like, what else do you have to do? Like, you already AOY for a KBF and OBBOS. seems
Um,
like if you ever become an expert at electronics as well as you are as junk fishing, game over for everybody else. Like at that point, it's let's just go for second place. Like now, Cody Milton is no longer is an all around fisherman and can now use his electronics to find fish at 30 feet depth. That's probably unfair for the rest of us.
yeah, I mean, it puts more options in your head too. I mean, that's why like I don't like the summer as much. Like I feel like your options in the spring are so much more limited. It's like as the year goes on, I feel like you just have more options and more things become possible, which makes it where an angler has to make more decisions. So I don't know, the more decisions you have to make, the more of them you have to get right to do well. I feel like so. I don't know. I think it's another part of why I don't do as well that time of year.
That's something that I wanted to touch on because it seems like you really capitalize. And I think you mentioned it on the KBN podcast. I think there was a week where they had no tournaments, and I think it was Jeff Mallard. I think Ryan Lambert wasn't that on that episode, but regardless, you were there to talk about how you were leading on both tournaments, and you mentioned something along the lines like the schedule for both tournaments, both KBS and Hobie BOS, kind of help you out because they really did a good job of chasing the spawn,
Mhm.
especially early in the season, and that kind of like not on purpose, but really played to your strength. Do you still now that you look back at it, now that you can rest on your laurels, kind of at least until the next season, do you feel that that is accurate? That you were really not on purpose, but just really took advantage of the scheduling.
Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely. And like even more so, I think three of the first six tournaments I fished were all cypress tree lakes. And that I mean that's always hard. I don't know, that's hard for me to not get excited about like going to a cypress tree lake. But yeah, in I think KBF was I want to say we had I want to say like two of the first three tournaments were all within 2 to 3 days of a new or a full moon. So it was like not only was it Great Lakes during the spawn, I mean it was like when it was really going down too. Like that Gunnersville tournament we had earlier this year. I still like even having lived in Florida for a few years. I think that was the most bass I'd ever seen locked on a bed. Was it Gunnersville that last weekend of April this year?
Is it? Do you really feel more pressured um when you go halfway through the season? The spawn bite, the tournaments now focus on finding cooler weather, maybe going up north, maybe going to Wisconsin because now we're in the dead of summer, so we there's not as many tournaments down south. If you didn't do as well as you would have wanted on the first part of the season, how does that affect you, man? As far as your preparation, if you feel like, man, I didn't take advantage of the spawn bite like I wish. Now I'm kind of like, the my strongest time it did not work out. Do you, that put pressure on you to kind of perform at towards the dead of summer when it's harder for you? Like you mentioned, not being as proficient with electronics.
Man, a little bit. I don't know. For whatever reason, it seems like I'm always due one good random smallmouth tournament a year. It's been that way for the last 3 years. So, and most of those have been river tournaments too. So I feel like the only me catching up is usually like one or two of those river tournaments, whether it's a Susquehanna or New River, or lacrosse. I mean, I think we've got lacrosse on the schedule a couple times again this next year, and that place has always been good to me. But yeah, I mean, if there's not a river tournament on the schedule, yeah, absolutely. And Dardanelle, I thought that I could do better at Dardanelle than I did, even it being in September. There's some good things that I can do that time of the year at Dardanelle, and I don't know. It didn't happen as much as anything. I probably just was losing momentum. I felt like probably as much as anything.
Were you kind of disappointed towards when like you said Darnell? By the time Darnell was Darnell was the last of the Hobie BOSP of the regular season, right?
Was yeah.
Were you disappointed with how you did, towards the last second half of the season?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I went up to Wolf and Fox, had a pretty terrible tournament there. Didn't even really have a very good practice. And Dardanelle was kind of the opposite. I had a pretty good practice. I felt like I knew one of a few areas the tournament should have been won in or could have been won in. Um, and I don't know. I think the first day I was in the top 10 and just had to stick like way too many fish. And I don't know. It was a poor tournament. I didn't even catch a limit the second day, like on a lake that I've probably fished as many tournaments.
Unheard of.
Yeah, like I've probably fished 50 plus tournaments on that lake, and yeah, it was a brutal weekend there. But yeah, it was just losing momentum as much as anything. And then I was excited about the KBF National Championship being on Kentucky. My dad grew up on like the back of the Blood River in Kentucky Lake, and my grandparents still live there. So I've spent an enormous amount of time there. So it was like I thought that if I spent a lot of time there, I could kind of get some momentum back for not just that event, but even going into the TOC. And yeah, it worked a little bit. It did.
I know you said it on Jeff Little. By the way, go follow Jeff Little. It's not the little
Little,
stuff, the little things on YouTube.
little things, yeah.
He's ramping up his YouTube channel, and I think it's awesome. He
It
kind
is.
of like, which I thought it was awesome. He covered, I think it was you and Russ Snyder on the
Yeah.
national championship. Um, so if you haven't watched that episode, go follow Jeff Little. By the way, Jeff Little, what I love about him is he puts a lot of content about safety.
Yeah.
And, that's very important. We get entertained by big hook sets and big bass, but we forget there's, when we're with Mother Nature,
Hmm.
it can get scary sometimes. So if you're new to kayak fishing, and even if you're a veteran of kayak fishing, go follow Jeff Little, the little things. I always call it the little stuff, and that's a movie. But the little things, and there's a lot of good content, not just entertaining, but stuff that could maybe potentially save your life. But going back to that, I saw you in the award ceremony, and you had a black eye, and I know you
Yeah.
mentioned it on that video. What the heck happened
So
on
we
national championship for
we
my audience that
yeah,
haven't watched that video?
we were checking out I was actually with Russ and we were checking out can't remember if it was a launch. I think it was a takeout actually. I don't think it was a launch. I think it was we were checking out to see if we could take out down there, and man, it was just a super steep cliff off this bridge, and I had a flip flop on. So, like one of the little flip flop things broke, and like I had one flip flop at the top of the cliff, and I had one at the bottom. Kind of like slid off about a 15-foot cliff and then like rolled down some boulders like down to the river. My phone was like probably 3 or 4 feet from going in the water.
Oh my god!
Yeah, and that's still like my eye's still not perfect. It's still it's still pretty roughed up.
But other than that, you were no worse for the wear, right? Like no.
Yeah, other than that, it was fine. I mean, fine. I mean, still like I had a bunch of scars kind of down my left side, I guess, but it was just like some road rash. But
How how scared was Russ and Jeff when they saw you just kind of like going down that cliff?
Jeff was there that night, I think, but he didn't see it actually happen.
Oh,
Russ kind of went into a different, tone, different tone. It was like he was looking at Cody, Cody, like just looking over this cliff, seeing if I was alive. But yeah, that's pretty.
well, I'm glad you're no worse for the wear that you did. How did you do in the national championship? I know Russ kind of stole the headline.
He did.
he did an amazing job. But tell us a little bit about the KBF national championship. Like, how did you do?
I finished third in the overall national championship, and I think second in the challenge and trail series. So it was good. It was cold. I fell in the water like twice the first day. My guides were freezing every morning except the last. It was not an easy tournament, but I don't know, it was one of the more fun tournaments I've ever honestly fished in. As far as just having super expansive boundaries, and it was just, I mean, as much time as I'd spent on Kentucky, I'd never get to see a lot of the places that I fished. So that made it fun for me.
You see, what I take about that is you fell in the water twice, your guides were frozen, and the next thing you said, it was one of the most fun tournaments you've done.
It was,
To me, I would have followed that with this is the worst thing that could, worst tournament
yeah.
I've ever been. But for you, I can already tell you're a half glass full kind of guy.
Yeah, there's actually I so that the first morning It was super cold. I mean, every day of practice, it was really warm. Like, didn't really know what to expect. Was hoping that they'd bite a crankbait really good the first day, and they actually did. But like this, I started in this hole like up, kind of way up a creek, and made a cast. Like, caught a little fish, caught another little fish, and then I got like a 17 and a half, 18-inch smallmouth on, and I like reach for it with the net, and I just roll out the front of the kayak. I'd never fished in the boat before. Um, and then I get like, I lose the fish. I don't dump the water out of my waders or anything. And I just like get back in the kayak, like paddle back up there. And I caught a 20 and a half out of the hole that I swam through. Like, right. I didn't catch any more fish out of that hole, but there was like one that was just waiting there for me. So it was pretty cool.
Well, congratulations on that national championship. I mean, third is nothing to sneeze at. Let me ask you this: I'm not completely familiar with what the point system. Now, you want the AOY for the Pro Series, right? Because there's two AOYs, if that's correct: Pro Series and Trail Series, correct?
I don't know. I think there's just one, but there might be two. I don't know.
So now,
Yeah.
the only reason why I say that is because I thought I saw Derek Brundle win AOY as well. So I was like, is that a challenge series? I don't know what
Yeah, I
that.
think it was the challenge series. It was the challenge series.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's what it was.
Okay, cool. So you going into the national championship now? Does the national championship? Well, it's three tournaments, kind of like bundled in one. It's a trail championship, the Pro Series championship. Is that?
I think
Tell me, tell me what it is, because I'm not disrespecting KBF and all that. It's just that it's kind of complicated.
I think it's the trail championship, challenge championship, and national championship.
There we go. So, the points. So there were still the AOI was still up for grabs, right? It hadn't been decided until the end of was it the troll? Well, yeah, I guess the troll championship.
Yeah.
And how close, how did that play out? As far as were you in the lead going into the trail championship?
I think I was in fourth
Oh,
going in.
really? Fourth.
Yeah, I think I was in fourth, going into day one. Anyways, good. But I think a lot of the people that were in like first through third, I want to say, didn't have the greatest day. But there was, I'm trying to think. Yeah, there was a lot of people that had like there was a lot of people in the hunt for that one. There's probably like 15 different people that were, had a chance to be in the 10 or even win Angler of the Year.
Were you at any point while fishing thinking about winning the AOY, or was that something that once everything was said and done, you were like, "Oh, I won AOY"?
Yeah, no, I really wasn't. I knew if I had a good second day for the Kentucky Lake one, that I assumed that I didn't think that it was super close, like from that point on. But the Hobie one, I mean, I had absolutely no idea. Like, I could have, when we were up there, I could have just as easily finished third in my head and had absolutely no idea. But yeah, no, I don't know. I'm not good with numbers, so I don't do a lot of the adding on the water. Just try to get the biggest ones I can beforehand.
Well, actually, I was watching. So to me, the biggest story was the AOY.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, other than winning, but going into day three, I forgot the name of the gentleman who just won it from Florida. Oh my God,
Brian Nelly.
Brian Nelly. So
Yeah.
Brian Nelly, by 10 a.m. that was done. By 9 a.m. it was done. It's like, oh yeah, he's gonna win it. So
Yeah.
now it becomes like, who's gonna win AOY? Obviously, you're going in there, you want to win. I mean, because winning secures the AOY.
Mm.
You did kind of okay day one, day two, but I'm assuming it was not what you would have liked, right? You was kind of further back. Did you at any time during day one and day two and day three were thinking about the AOY and what you needed to do? Did that play at all a factor?
Man, a little bit after day two. After day two was over, I didn't think there was any way I could go back to where I'd been fishing, and give myself like a reasonable chance at what I thought it would, at what I thought I probably needed to be like high 90s. In reality, I ended up being like right at 90 inches, which I wouldn't have even thought that I probably could have got 90 inches out of that area, but based on just there was a lot of people that struggled to catch a limit that second day.
Yeah.
I knew it was just going to get colder. And I mean, in all reality, I mean, I think the third day we had some of the biggest stringers, but probably some of the fewest fish caught, like as far as across the board. Um, so I didn't end up moving. Like I ended up going back to probably an area that I'm more familiar with than anywhere on Caddo. And it's burned me a lot on day threes. Like have not loved being in there before on third days. And that was in the back of my head too. It was like this place does have a limited amount of fish. But it was really like an hour and a half. Like if the tournament would have ended at 1:30, I probably would have had like 74 inches or something. It was like I caught like a 16 and a half fish, 16 and a half incher off a grass mat. And then I caught like an 18 and a quarter off the next grass mat. And then caught a 19 and a half on a Cinco that I'd made forecast with. I'd made the forecast with a spinnerbait on the exact same side of the tree that I caught like my second biggest fish of the day which was that 19 and a half. So it was just, I don't know, it was crazy how the day developed. I mean, you would have thought it was dead in the water multiple times over again. And it kind of all came together in about a 30 to 40 minute period, really. I caught a 20 and a half, like I think it was probably 8:30 or so, which was about an hour into first cast. It was the first fish I caught. And I didn't get another fish for probably an hour after that, and literally didn't have a limit till 1:30, much less like almost 90 inches after 3. So it was kind of just wild how it all did unfold.
After day one, did you at any point look at the leaderboard and started kind of doing the numbers? So like, I didn't do great. Christian Fisher's, I think she was in second place. I think Russ was in third place. I
Think so.
want to say Ewan was in fourth before
Yep.
the TOC, and then Nolan was fifth.
Yep.
Like I say, I'm a huge fan of the sport. So I was watching at it, and after day one, I'm thinking Christian Fisher's got to be kicking herself for not having the best day one, because like at that point is like I think all eyes, as far as the AOY goes, all eyes was on Cody Milton. Like, what is Cody Milton gonna do?
Yeah.
Because if he has a great day one, then it's pretty much over. Because
Yeah.
I figured Cody Milton's not gonna skunk day two. He's gonna catch, if he catches 5 fish on day one, he's gonna catch 5 fish on day two. He's gonna catch 5 fish on day three. When by the time day one was done, I'm like, oh, Cody's, to my surprise, I was like, damn, Cody's struggling. Christine Fisher's got to be kicking herself, because that was her big chance. If she would have had a really big day one, or even a decent, like, day one, she would have put the pressure on you. After day one, were you nervous at all about the AOY, knowing that you didn't do as good as you probably would have liked?
I knew I'd hit around that number I thought I needed. So as much as I was okay with being, I think I had like 88 inches or so. I didn't expect Brian to catch like high 90s every day. I really thought that like being in that low 90s range a day would be fine. So I wasn't super, super bummed out about it. I think I was impressed as much about anything as I think like, man, like 85 inches was in 22nd, 23rd place after day one. So it was, I don't know, it was easy to believe just because it was probably the best day anyone was going to catch them. So I don't know, I just kind of felt like I needed to continue to pace myself from that point. I was a little more worried after day two when it was pretty apparent that both the Minor brothers were on them pretty good.
Yeah.
And, like their bite was just about to get stronger on the third day. And it did. So it was, yeah, I don't know. I was still pretty confident after the first day. I was starting to dwindle after the second day for sure, though.
Yeah, the second day you kind of dropped. The first day you did like 16th best. Second day you did 19th best, and at that point, Ewan was in 15th place. Christian Fisher had a better day, 13th place. Russ Snyder was number 6 at that point. I think Russ Snyder
Yeah,
was kind of like leading in the
probably.
AOY point if the AOY points would have ended on the day 2. And day 3, obviously, Ewing had a great day. And I'm trying to look over here as I'm talking to you. And then you had an amazing day with 80, 89 and 70 quarters to move you up to, ninth that day. When I looked, so I was looking and I figured once they announce you and on the overall leaderboard on the total after day 3, you were number 8. So at that point, I knew if Ewan finishes in the top 3, he wins. If Nolan finishes in the top 3, he probably wins. And it was that close. Like Ewan finished number in the fifth spot. So as soon as they announced you in the fifth spot, I'm like, okay, Cody is at least second place. So now it all depends on Nolan, where Nolan Minor ended, and that was immediately after fourth place. And at that point, I was thinking, okay, Cody won this as far as the AOY. How nervous were you? You announced eighth place. What in your mind had you already done the math and figured, okay, Russ Snyder was out of the picture by this point. Christian Fisher was out of the picture by this point. Were you nervous of you? Were you thinking, oh crap, where did Ewan or Minor ended up?
I really had no idea.
Really?
No, and I mean, I don't think Ewing did either. I knew it had to have been close when Jason Broach called me and he was like, "I think you may have won because he's way, I don't know, the dude like can write, any type of code for anything." So I knew he thought it must be at least be close. And man, I honestly didn't even know how close it was, to be honest. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like Ewing and I were both just like not saying much, just breathing as quietly and quickly as we could, wait for AJ to announce it. But yeah, no, it's pretty wild, pretty wild.
That's even funny. It's like, am I the only one that was really tuning in on this? Because I was like, man, that was all I cared about. Once, Brian, once Brian already like 9 o'clock, kind of anticlimactic to his credit, you got locked down compared to what we had on KBF last year, which you and Guillermo were just going at it. And at the end of the day, it was like a coin toss, like who won. There was really, it was really that tight. This one was pretty much over. So by 9 o'clock, it's like, okay, he hasn't won. Who's gonna be the AOY? You won by less than 2 points. That's how close it was.
Yeah.
That was you and Minor ended up at 385.1, Ewan at 383.3, and then Nolan ended up at 380.3. Let me ask you this. I know on the regular, maybe you don't know this, but I'll ask you because I'm not sure. On the Hobie BOS, like if you win Big Bass, you get something like 2 decimal points or something like that.
Yeah,
right?
0.2 or 0.3, something like
0.3, I think it is. And then if you win if you're the leader after day 1, you also get like 0.5 or something like that.
I think so, or even maybe 0.3. I thought, I don't know. 0.3.
I think it's one is 0.3 and one is 1.2. I'm not sure.
Okay.
The only reason why I say that because I see here people that are 0.4. So I know one of them is 0.3. So I think it's 0.3 if you win day 1 and decimal points, and then 0.1 if you win Big Bass. I'm gonna go with that. I may not be wrong. In the Tournament of Champions, if you win day 1 or day 2, did they still give you those decimal points?
I don't know. I don't think so, but I really don't know.
It's interesting. I kind of wanted to get I wish I would have done the research before I got you on this, and I was hoping you know the answer. And I wanted to also know if Big Bass will get you point something, 0.1 in this case. I think it was. Yeah. But regardless, it was really tight, close race. Looking back at it, is this your best year you've ever had?
It's definitely, yeah, I would say it is. Yeah, definitely the most exciting. And just as far as the amount of people that were in a lot of the tournaments that I fished this year, even I feel like that goes a long ways as far as it being a little more meaningful. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like I've never probably for sure said that, but I would say it's probably the best year I've ever had.
Well, once again, congratulations on it, man. I noticed, I was looking at the tournaments for the Hobie BOS in 2023, and I was looking at Kato in March. I got to ask you, how excited are you that Kato is in March?
Yeah, I don't know if it'll break the I don't know. What did think it took 107 inches was the biggest bag of the year at Santee Cooper this year. I don't know if that'll be broken, but I think it'll be. I think we might break the overall day two.
I
At two. Yeah.
I got two bets. It's gonna be broken, and it's gonna be either broken by you probably, because I know how good you are in cattle, and I know how good you are in bed fishing. Now I know this part of the country, Texas, well, anything in the South, is really depending on February. February is the key. We've had the last two Februarys, we've had ice on water. Um, this year uh was pretty bad in Lake Fork. The year before that, there was no national trails, but it was even worse. Um, for, Fortunately enough, there was no national trails 2 years ago in February. So I think it really did say if we get like February is probably the worst winter month in Texas and kind of Louisiana as well because it's right at the border. So if we get a mild winter, I think by March you'll see a lot of bed fishing. If we get a really, really cold winter like we've had over the last 3 years, and I think that might push back the spawning a little bit further down to maybe towards the end of March, the beginning of April. What are you hoping for?
Man, either or. I've been out there. I've been out there when it's been like almost not necessarily snowing that time of the year, but when they definitely weren't on beds. And man, they live pretty shallow, that place. I mean, there's definitely some of that 6 to 8 foot water. Some guys have been catching them in recently, but I don't know. I'm definitely hoping for some warm weather where we can get the short sleeves out and hopefully look at a few of them on beds. But even if we don't, I mean, I still don't think the quality of like the size fish we see caught will change. I think it'll still be a 200 plus inches event.
And I think I said Cado, but there's also another lake,
Vistano. Yeah.
Bistano. Was
Yeah.
that included in the national championship 2 years ago for KBF?
It was. Yes.
Did you fish that one, or did you fish Cado
I
on that one?
did. No, actually, I think most of the people in the top 10 fish Vistano.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So compared, I hate to ask you, but
Mhm.
I will, and you answer you answer fully as truthfully as you want to answer, because I know there's a tournament that's going to be there, and then you don't want to spill too much of the beans here. But which one do you like more, Cado or Bissano?
I like Vistano more. I mean, Caddo. They're probably two of my favorite lakes in the country. I mean, I'm just like literally, they're definitely both in the top three. I actually spent 2 weeks out on Bistano before the TOC since Caddo was off limits. I actually fished out there with Guillermo for 3 days and probably got like 3 6 to 7 pounders. So I caught bigger fish on Bistano than I did on Caddo. That entire week I was at Caddo actually, but it's a weird. There's probably more 10 to 15 pounders in Caddo, and there's probably more 5 to 8 pound fish in Bistano.
I haven't fished Bissano. Well, I haven't fished either one of them. How do they compare to each other? Are they similar lakes? I know Cado is a natural. I think it's a natural lake.
Yeah.
Is Bissano the same thing, a natural lake, or is this a reservoir that you know of?
I'm honestly not sure. They're definitely set up the exact same way. It's definitely a low head dam with just a river flowing into them. Like that, they can't control the water level on either one of them really.
And Soul cypress trees as well and grass.
It is, yep. Um, but now I don't know. I know a lot of people down in Louisiana love Bistano and Caddo. I mean, that's kind of the two. I feel like that's the two big ones in the area. I guess they've got Bussy Break, and there's another big one now. Some people have been talking Caney Fork.
Yeah, Caney Fork.
Yeah,
I
I
heard
feel
of
like
that
all
one.
4 of those are kind of probably the 4 best lakes in the area.
Nice. Well, let me ask you this, Cody, before we kind of wrap this up. I wanted to ask you, I know there's been a lot of talk about the rule changes
Mhm.
um, that some people are wanting to happen
Mhm.
in all three national shows. KBF already announced that they're going to have um, some rule changes, pre-fishing, designated launches or something like that, boundaries. Bassmaster is expected to make a similar announcement, and then we'll see what Hobie BOS is doing. Without going into details and controversies or anything like that, what is your stand? Do you believe that there should be there should be rule changes, and if you believe that there's going to be rule changes, what do you think those rule changes should be?
I mean, I think the certified or designated launches is the easiest one. I mean, for one, it kind of polices everyone from the
Yeah.
get go as far as just everyone being there. I mean, I know at the ramp I launched at this week, like we all had a pretty fun time. I mean, we were listening to like Born on the Bayou and like pedaling off. I don't know. I kind of missed. I don't know. I missed being able to launch with a lot of people like that. Um, so I mean, I think that's the easiest one that doesn't have to be overly policed or investigated to know that that's what it's all that's actually happening. Um, Not to say the sport couldn't use some of the other rule changes that I keep hearing about, because I mean I do think that they could, and I don't necessarily think there's anything wrong with any of them. But I think the certified launches is probably the best one that I keep hearing and seeing.
Let me ask you this: as far as the uh, designated off limits, now I go
Mhm.
back and forth on this one. I try to look at both points. As far as the growth of the sport, and I've said this on many, both on my podcast and on podcasts that I've been a guest at. Um, this is not a spectator sport, right? This is not the NFL where you have an iconic player that people tune in to watch. Um, this is not driven by sponsorship or revenues or TV revenues or stuff like. It's really run by the money that comes out of the pocket of the anglers that are participating. And I made that distinction because that really changes the dynamic. When you got TV rights and stuff like that, that's where you don't see athletes paying to play. They actually get paid to play.
Mhm.
Our sport is different. We have to pay to play, and that is what's going to generate the tournament winnings. That means we grow if there's more people involved. My thought has always been, and I say this respectfully, if I want to go into the tournament and I want a chance to take down, let's say, Cody Milton, which I say it from a fan's perspective, like there would be nothing more than me win a tournament and say, "Hey, I beat Cody Milton." Now I say that with respect; it's not hatred or anything like that. It's just saying, like I'm, that's the measuring stick. You want to go out there. My competitive juices get flowed when I see big names out there. This is my chance to kind of go toe to toe with the best and see where I rank at. Some
Mhm.
days I'll do great, some days I may not do great. But I think a lot of people, talking to some people, they feel like, man, I have to go against Cody Milton, which is an immense talent in kayak fishing.
Mhm.
Um, and on top of that, he gets like, I'm not just saying Cody Milton because you're here. This could apply to anyone. Like on top of that, he gets like maybe a week or 2 weeks of pre-fishing while I'm a working man. I only get like maybe if I'm lucky Thursday or Friday. And I think that's been the push for more
Mhm.
people, for people to say we want an off limits time. What are your thoughts on it? Because obviously you get more free time to fish and you really benefit from being able to stay a week there and fish. So I know it's not in your best interest to have off limit times limited to the day before, 48 hours before. But if you're being objective, what is your thoughts on the perspective of maybe that being something that changes?
I mean, I would love to see him go to 3 days. I mean, I think that's kind of the. I feel like if it ever takes you more than 3 days, whenever you start getting over that 3 day period of practice, you can kind of almost start getting a little too dialed in, almost, or thinking you're getting too dialed in. I don't know. I would like to see it go to 3 days, though. I mean, there's no sense in spending two, three, several weeks at a place. I'm not saying I haven't done it, because I mean, there
Yeah,
are,
no, I mean,
there are bodies of water where it helps to do that, but more times than not, no. I mean, I think 3 days would be the perfect number. For one, it'd save a lot of people money, that because it's like if I'm not doing it, I feel like someone else is, and they probably are. So it definitely saved more money even for the people that do have the ability to do it, versus the people that don't and are frustrated that people are. So I think it kind of helps all parties, in my opinion.
let me ask you this, and this I know this is a personal question, so feel free to reject the question, but I'll ask you this, and this is where I want to go with, or the point of this question is like, for like say for example, Christine Fisher. Now I don't know her financial situation, but it seems like and even including Russ Snyder, their their income is comes from sponsorship, but it also helps them out, if they win tournaments.
for
And
sure.
not to say they're completely relying on that. As far as you go, as far as you, I mean, would you say this is your job, and how reliant are you on tournament winnings to kind of keep doing what you're doing?
It's definitely half of it for sure. I would say it's definitely, I think I was looking at it. I think the least amount I'd made was like 17 something thousand the last, handful of 4 or 5 years or something. But no, I mean, I feel like I mean, you definitely need to win a couple of tournaments a year. If you don't have, I mean, obviously, especially if you don't have other things going on. But yeah, no, I mean, I think an angler that can kind of get around that $20,000 in earnings a year, and maybe has that, maybe gets to, somewhere half of that from sponsors, kind of has a chance to maybe kind of do it full time. It's much less like most everyone I know that does have some pretty cool like side jobs they're doing, whether it's like printing t-shirts or power washing or things like that.
Yeah, and that's the whole dynamic of it. And that's what I wanted to get at is as a person that really kind of relies on at least getting some income back
Mm.
from tournament winnings. There's a different dynamic because if you're going out there and you say, I need to catch a check, even if it's not first place, to kind of help me out, and there's no off limit times, and you see, Russ Snyder, Christine Fisher, and even some of the local guys that are saying, man, they can go there anytime. There's no off limit. That kind of puts the pressure on you. In my opinion, I'm not a national tournament angler like yourself, but I would think that kind of puts the pressure on you. Like, man, I need to get there as early as I can and maybe spend more money in order to give myself the best shot. Whereas if it's only 2 3 days, then I don't have to, camp out like a week before because
Uh,
I know everybody is at the same playing field. Is that true? Is that the
for
way you see it?
sure. That's definitely the way I'd see it for sure.
Interesting stuff. I know, and it's different dynamics. It's different for a local angler
Mm.
that lives, 30 minutes, leave an hour or less from the lake than somebody that's traveling like yourself. Again, Russ Snyder, Christian Fisher, or Ryan Lambert, they're constantly traveling and, Airbnbs, gasoline, and all that. And I know sponsorship helps, but it's still an investment. And the challenge for the tournament directors is trying to find that middle ground because the trail cannot hold itself just by anglers to travel nationally, because at the very best, at most, that's maybe 20.
Yeah, 20.
Most of it is going to be out of 200, 20 may be national trail anglers.
Mhm.
The other 180 are going to be regional or local anglers. So
Mhm.
you have to find a way to, hey, we want to help out as a tournament director. We want to help out the guys that are supporting the trail in every state that are traveling. But at the same time, if we don't get the local if we don't make rules that the local anglers are happy with,
Mhm.
then the payouts is not going to be as good.
True.
And that's I don't envy AJ or anybody else that has to take those decisions. I know there's tough decisions, and I think we all, especially in the podcast world, we all like to play um, tournament director armchair and criticize and make observations. Where the reality is that there's a lot of tough decisions that go
Mhm.
into being a tournament director. So shout out to AJ, Steve Owens, and some of the best tournament directors out there locally and nationally for helping the sport grow.
Mhm.
Cody, before I let you go, I wanted to give you a few minutes to kind of plug in your sponsors, anybody that helps you in your kayak fishing.
Man, Fish USA, any online tackle, line, rods you need, Dobbins rods. I caught every fish on. It's like 2 tournaments in a row. I've caught every fish on a rod that's 6'8", 6'8", a 683 CB or a 683. Which I don't know. I feel like over the years I'd started using such long rods, and I don't know. Not a lot of people use a 6'8" rod anymore, and I've started to really kind of dive back down to those shorter, kind of more accurate rods. Um, Dakota Lithium. They've been powering everything from van to depth finder to absolutely everything. Newport vessels. It's the I don't know. It's probably the cheapest way you can kind of get your kayak powered, and the Dakota Lithium 24-volt pack is probably the easiest way to power it. You can definitely run two 12 volts batteries together for that NK 180, but it's pretty plug and play with a 24-volt pack. But that's pretty much it. And Armando, thanks for having me on. I've
Oh, my
always
pleasure, man.
podcast. We've had a good time.
No, man, my pleasure. I do this one for my audience and second to help you guys out. Is there if a little grain of sand that I can help out, you get one more sponsor or one more person to buy into an entry fee and help you guys out. That's all I care about, man. I don't make a living out of this. So I really appreciate you taking your time, man.
Dude, thank you.
Well, for those out there listening, thank you again for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode. One more question, Cody. Where can people follow you on social media?
Kodiak Fishing or Kodiak. I guess it's Kodiak.com, and my Instagram handle is Kodiak Fishing.
There you go. So go follow Kodiak, support Cody, and learn a few things definitely from one of the best that has graced our sport. So if you're out there listening, again, wear your PFDs. If you're going to be on the water and you have a couple of beers, please drink responsibly. Make sure you make it back to your loved ones. Go check out the sponsor, Douglas Outdoors. Go to douglasoutdoors.com. Peace out, everyone.
Thank you.